I'm Jamie Harry, Chief Security Architect here at Cisco. Glad to be here. We're going to dive into Cisco's innovative approach to SASE. And if you don't know what SASE is, we'll get through that as well. But it is an acronym, and it stands for Secure Access Service Edge. Another piece of, housekeeping is the swords behind me and the axe underneath my head are all replicas from Lord of the Rings, because I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan, so I just had to get that out of the way as well. So let's dive into an agenda. It's pretty slim agenda here. We're going to focus on SASE overview, take a look at our use cases, and then we're going to have some healthy demo along the way. Stop me, talk over me. I'll stop, take your questions. Of course, I'll take a breath every once in a while and ask for questions as well. As we go through this SASE journey. So let's start with the problem statement. Our networking and security teams are struggling, and they're struggling in two primary areas. One is connecting users to the applications and data they need to get to. As we have a work from home environment, primarily now, and even as we return to work, this has been a continued struggle. Everything from poor user experience when you're accessing those cloud apps. We have a mass migration of applications moving out of our data centers into the clouds. That complexity comes in multiple forms, but one of those is how do I make sure that the users that are connecting are doing so in a secure manner, and that I have established trust with those users and their devices. And then, of course, we always have evolving threat vectors. So how do we protect ourselves against those in the ever-changing world that we live in? As I move these workloads to the cloud, I have different security capabilities, different security stacks. I don't have the same security stack I had on-prem. And as my users go remote, they're not behind the security stack that they used to be behind anymore. So a lot of times this is the first time that laptop has ever seen the light of day outside of a campus network. It's all out there by its lonesome. So how are we going to make sure that we can protect it from the evolving threat vectors? Well, SASE is here to help. In general, it helps us get back in the driver's seat, helps us deliver secure access anywhere, anytime, no matter where that user is. We're connecting the users to the applications, but doing it in a way that is simpler and is more secure. It's also consistent. So those integrated policy models follow you no matter where you are, whether you're at home, whether you're on-prem, whether your application's on-prem or in the cloud, really doesn't matter anymore because we're moving the access control, or at least a large portion of that access control, into the cloud edge. So at Cisco, we're pretty uniquely positioned here because we're strong in both of the major areas, capability areas that SASE requires, and that's networking and security. So here's a look at some of the capabilities we have in networking. We're going to dive into some of these in some detail, but as you can see here, we have site-to-site connectivity, of course. I mean, we are a routing company after all. We have SD-WAN, not just one, but a couple different flavors. We have performance-based routing, been doing segment routing for a long time. And I really like the middle mile optimization. And this is all about how do I make the user experience to the app the fastest, the most optimized experience it could possibly be. Maybe even faster than they could go natively from their home office to the app directly. If we take them through the cloud, we can speed that up. And then on the security side, one of the largest security companies in the world is focused on all things security, including firewall, web gateway, zero trust, DNS security. But here today, we're going to focus on what about the cloud edge, the stack of security in the cloud? What do we have to offer there? And how do we differentiate? Let's move into it because SASE is a journey. It's not a single solution from us or from anybody in order to build a SASE architecture. It does take consolidating through a single vendor to be the most efficient. Doesn't mean you're going to have one vendor. That's not the point. But where you can do consolidation that matters, then do it. Because you're going to find efficiencies. You're going to actually increase your security in a lot of ways as well, because you'll now have a more consistent admin experience, policy, etc. It's also real important to have global presence and peering relationships, and I'll show you some of the things that we're doing in that area. to make sure that the performance and the resiliency of this cloud security stack is the highest it can be. And then building things on microservices-based architecture. Super important. Everything that we do in our cloud security stack is based on this microservices architecture, which means with containers comes agility and the ability to add new functionality, change current functionality way more quicker than you could if it's the old virtual machine in the cloud type style. So one of the things that I think is super important for us to always keep in mind for any security discussion, SASE especially, is how good is the threat intelligence that's feeding this security stack, and how good is the threat intelligence team behind it. So I'd like to highlight our Talos security team. It's one of the largest private security teams on the planet. They see more stuff per day than, a good example here is we see 10x what Google searches sees per day and how many web requests we see per day. It's just a Google amount of data. And then more importantly, we take that and make actionable intelligence out of it. And down to an industry leading about 4.5 hours from an O-day to when we can detect it, do something about it. Might seem like a long time, and frankly, it is a long time in the threat world we live in, but the industry average is measured in weeks. I think it's always good for us to remember that the security controls are only as effective as the quality of the threat intelligence that's feeding them, and always to ask questions about any vendors that you choose. You know, what does your security team look like? And you'll find in many cases that they don't have one, or it's very small, and they rely just on third party. We do third party as well, but we do a ton of unique research on our own. All right, so we have a pretty complex problem in SASE, so we needed to boil it down into something that's more simple, something that can be actionable on how you can tackle that SASE journey in bite-sized pieces. So the first one, well, first of all, we call it the 3 C's. And the 3 C's, the first one is connect. That is all about how do I get the user connected to the application, or how do I get the device, if it's an IoT device, connected to the application. So once I have that connection, how do I control it? And I want to do it from a zero trust access control perspective, meaning least privilege access, ubiquitous. And I want to make sure that I have the leading threat protection there too. So it's all about controlling. In a lot of cases, it's about gaining back control because those users have gone remote. They no longer have that security stack that they're behind like they were when the campus or the branch was happening. So how do I gain back that control, that visibility? And then lastly, the last C is converge. How do I make sure that when I'm doing this, I'm converging networking and security, technology and teams, so that those teams and the technology that they respectively control are working together as a single system. And that's really a cornerstone to what SASE is all about, is making sure that that collaboration is working. And we have the automation to be able to do things at both the network layer and the security layer, at internet speed. Okay, let's dive in some detail. We're going to cover 2 use cases. And when you think about what SASE use cases there are, most of them can boil up into these top level, high level use cases. One is secure remote worker and one is secure edge. Other people call it secure branch or secure colo or secure campus. But the idea is that it's an edge of your network that you need to defend against attack. So let's deal with first one first, secure remote worker. So here's an example of our blueprint for a secure remote worker architecture. On the left-hand side, we have the core elements. So you need a cloud security stack. You need to have a zero trust secure access, which means I need, another way to put that is I want to have a seamless remote access user experience for my remote workers. And then finally, the enhancements that are there, MDM and endpoint security. So let's take a look at the diagram and kind of walk through it. On the remote worker, the first thing you want to do is consider the security of that device that they're on. As I mentioned before, it's out there by its lonesome now. So let's make sure it has the best security it possibly can, because that endpoint security has become more critical now than it ever has. So here we recommend Cisco's Secure Endpoint, formerly known as AMP, to do all the anti-malware, antivirus, behavior control, heuristics, command line scripting defense, all of those fileless-based malware type of attack vectors. So now that we've locked down that remote worker workstation as best we can, let's connect them up to the apps. So let's deal with that first C. And here we're showing two different ways to get to an app. Public apps, of course, are going to take the top of this diagram, and they're going to go from our AnyConnect agent, which most of you know is a VPN agent. However, it does a lot of other things. It's multiple modules. There's 6 or 7 different things that it can do other than just VPN. And one of those is connect you securely up into the cloud. So it literally intercepts all your DNS, your HTTP, and your HTTPS traffic, and tunnels it up into Umbrella, which is our cloud security stack. And once it gets there, it's going to go through different capability sets to secure that. DNS security, web security. That would include URL filtering, anti-malware, antivirus. DLP would be here, RBI, remote browser isolation. And then, of course, your cloud access security broker functions, too, to help you with shadow IT and just application awareness and control. And then once it gets through all that, if it doesn't get dropped, then it goes out to the internet directly. But it's going to the internet through our architecture, which means it's using our direct connects that we have in our carrier neutral facilities that we have all of our data centers in. So you're optimized for the best possible experience when you go to Box, Dropbox, Office 365. You're literally taking a shortcut across the internet to get to a lot of those common SaaS services. Well, what about private applications? So private applications, I can't just go across the internet because they're private. So I have 2 options here, one of which is a VPN-less option, which is also clientless. I just pop my browser up and I type in the URL just like I would if I was on-prem. But this time I go from AnyConnect, I go across through the security stack, and then I pop out at a thing called a network gateway. And this is from a Duo, as one of our solutions here. And it works like a reverse proxy. Think of it like a publishing portal where you publish your web apps. You can also do SSH. Pretty soon you'll be able to do RDP. And all the web servers behind it are hidden behind that proxy. The neat thing about it is all of the authentication is still done through the Duo experience. So you get multi-factor authentication through Duo. We're going to check the posture of that remote worker's machine along the way too. We're going to make sure that they have patches and updates, that are not jailbroken if it's iOS or Android device, etc. And we're watching for behavior heuristics as well, the whole UEBA. So this provides a clientless remote access capability that, if you think about how many web apps we have today, it's becoming the majority. In most cases, it is the majority of web apps. So we don't need to have a full-blown VPN in order to get there. But we still leverage the security stack in the cloud. We still leverage all the great features that we have from a zero trust perspective with our Duo.
Is there
Yes, go ahead.
Jamie, is there any plan to expand the number of applications that you mentioned? Web apps, SSH, and RDP is forthcoming. In a lot of the zero trust models, we don't see that kind of limitation. And so I guess my question is, what's the roadmap for additional applications there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the roadmap on that is to get to all ports and protocols through not necessarily just a browser experience, but through a VPN-less experience. So for today, for anything that requires protocols outside of the ones we mentioned, that's where you still use your AnyConnect full tunnel IPsec. That AnyConnect tunnel is shown at the bottom here. We'll do all of the ports and protocols just like it does today. But what's, I think, unique about us is that you can start the zero trust journey and start your SASE journey super easy if you're already using AnyConnect. So let's say you got AnyConnect today, and yeah, that's a VPN experience. I want to enhance that. You can very quickly add the modules to do the other things we mentioned. Quickly add a module that does umbrella security, redirects your traffic. Quickly add a Duo experience on top of it, all through just in-service upgrades of that AnyConnect client.
Given the federal government's OMB memo 2107 or whatever, migration to IPv6 only, can you talk about what the IPv6 support is across this stack? Will it operate as IPv6 only? Can it do translation in the middle from, NAT64, DNS64, et cetera? Does it run dual stack?
Yeah, great questions. So take it in certain areas because it does vary by capability set. So on the remote worker, the secure endpoint, the AMP for endpoints supports that dual stack host, as does AnyConnect. So if you want to do a pure VPN experience, you can do it IPv4, v6. Works both ways across multiple operating systems. If you want to do the DNS security, that also supports IPv6 as well. But the web security today does not support the v6 yet. But that is definitely on our roadmap, something that we need to get done in short order.
Okay, I mean, I would expect that, from a remote user standpoint, they're going to come in dual stacked, right? So they may come in as 4 because that's what their ISP provides or whatever, but they will need to be able to transit when it gets to the enterprise as v6. So, proxying through there v4 to v4, that's probably fine, but access to internal things that may be v6 only for the, example that I've given, but, a full dual stack would be optimal.
Yeah, exactly. And through AnyConnect, you can get that today where you could start at v4 and then at the gateway do the translation from 4 to 6 or just do a pure 6 all the way through.
Yep.
But when you introduce the security stack in the cloud other than the DNS, that's a journey for us.
That is on your roadmap, you said, right?
I didn't say it's committed, but yes, it's on our aspirational roadmap. How about that?
You should commit it.
I agree with you. I do. All right, let's move into the next use case, which is Secure Edge. So very similar security capabilities here, except now I'm at a on-prem location, and that Secure Edge could be a colo, it should be a branch, campus, whatever it might be. And I guess the last one it could be is a branch of one. And that would be your home office that has a hardware device protecting the home network. We do a lot of that here at Cisco, where we have providing wireless VPN all from a single box at the house. The difference here relies in the bottom part, which is the SD-WAN fabric. Being able to get the most performance out of your WAN, the best telemetry, including access to the cloud. We call it cloud on-ramp, which we'll talk about in a second. Being able to get to those IaaS services the most efficiently as well. From how do I get the security stack in the cloud for internet traffic? And this would be where direct internet access comes in, DIA for short. Because our things are moving to the cloud, we can no longer backhaul most of that traffic to the internet. So we need to provide DIA, but the biggest issue with DIA, direct internet access, at all my branches is, holy cow, that's so hard to manage, and I don't have the security tools to do so, even if I wanted to. So if you take a look at 100 or 1,000 branches, you don't want to manage the same perimeter security stack you have today at a couple egress points across 100 or 1,000 branches. So that's why SASE exists. It's one of the reasons why security as a service is so popular. Let's just move the majority of that security stack into the cloud, common policy for all my 100 or 1,000 branches, and I just set up a tunnel for my traffic to go through to get to that security stack in the cloud. Now, Duo's still here because you're still authenticating at the access of the applications. whether they're private or public apps, don't care. We still want to do that authentication, and just as importantly, the device posture. So I can say, yes, it is Jamie. I know it's him because he did biometric MFA, and he's on a corporate device, and that corporate device has all the requisite patches and security tools it's required to have. If it didn't, then I would deny access or warn the user and have them self-patch. So click here and we'll automatically update your AV. Would be an example. Harkens back to the early days of NAC for those of you that have been through that world with us, but in a much simpler manner, so that you don't have all of the traditional setup that's required to do a full-blown NAC. All right, let's get into our first demo. I'm going to show you a little bit about vManage and how this works for that secure edge. I want to focus on a couple things, one of which is this dashboard. The dashboard tells you your current health of your SD-WAN fabric. It also tells you the health of your applications that are going through those tunnels. And as you know, SD-WAN is about application-aware routing, so we can make routing decisions dynamically based on these health metrics to make sure that the experience is always optimized, that the best path is always taken, whether it's to a cloud app or an on-prem app, another site, don't matter. I want to show you how easy it is to inject that security stack in the cloud into 100 or 1,000 branch routers, or 10 of, whatever your case might be. So we start with the template, and this is my branch template. And on this template, I want to include that security stack. And we've done some automation behind the scenes, some integration between the solution sets to make it a pretty darn seamless experience. So in the VPN setup, we have a new template called the Secure Internet Gateway template. So when I click on that, it'll ask me, do I want to pick the default Secure Internet Gateway? I'm going to show you how easy it is to set one up though. So just give it a name. I'm just going to call it Umbrella. That's who we're connecting to. The provider is already there. And I just basically tell it, what interface do you want to go out to Umbrella on? So I'm going to pick IPv6 0 as that interface. Now, when I add that tunnel, I can have a high availability pair or choose a backup, but I don't really need a backup because this thing is self-healing. The Umbrella architecture is based on BGP Anycast, and it allows you to self-heal. So even if I didn't select a backup tunnel for this router, that tunnel, if there was a problem with the current data center I'm connected to, would auto home to another data center, the next best one. I could choose, however, to do a backup. I'm just showing one not configured here, and then it would have tertiary redundancy. So once I have the template built here, as you'll notice, I didn't have to go in and tell it what Umbrella sites and data centers to connect to. I don't have to care that I'm deploying this on a router in Texas, and I needed to go to the best data center in Texas, and I got another router in London, and I needed to connect to the best thing in London. That's taken care of for you as part of this automation. It'll automatically configure the best data centers for the router it's deploying on.
Is best determined by latency? It's really, you said it was just Anycast first to respond, or is there some other geolocation type process going on in the background to determine best termination point?
Yeah, great question. So there's two things that are happening here. One is, the primary one is BGP Anycast is working its magic to give you the best decision to get there. But then remember, this is an SD-WAN router, so it can also apply those metrics of application routing to that decision as well, and make sure that that is the best experience possible.
And just taking one step back, as you were configuring,
Sure.
whether or not you had a backup, is there a difference in failover times? I mean, sometimes I know that, self-healing, great. It means that when a tunnel fails, I'll find another termination endpoint. If I have a backup, is it a faster failover? Like, I'm trying to figure out why the option is even there if it's not required. Yeah,
it can be a faster failover if you configure a secondary, if you set your timers really low. So that is why it's still an option, because you can theoretically get to the point where you almost don't drop a packet. If you rely on just the default timers, you usually don't have any TCP resets, but you could. It usually happens, within a minute.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so continuing on to the credentials. So the credentials, this is just about telling it, I have an account in Umbrella. This is who my tenant is. Because they both use smart licensing in the background, all we got to do is use the API to get them. So we just click get keys. It knows who I am already because I'm logged into vManage, and it just goes and grabs that data for me. And now it knows, who I am. So the next thing I want to do on this is be able to apply this template, to some routers. So we have what we call, a zero-touch deployment. With vManage, I drop ship out a router to 100 branches. I have somebody plug it in, like literally just plug power and plug the internet cable in to the device. And then that device boots up, it calls home, and it sits there and waits for me to do something with it. So it sits in a container. All of the routers that are there, I can just go to attach devices to my new template. I see my dropship router right there. I just grab it. I tell it, this is the template I want you to use. I'm uploading a CSV file, which has IP addresses for that particular site. And now it's off and running, doing its thing. So it'll configure those. Now that was one router, works the same for 10,000 routers. On the Umbrella side that it just connected to, I'm flipping to Umbrella now, the cloud security stack. You can see I have one active network tunnel on the top right. It tells me about malware, command and control, crypto mining, cloud malware, like just my health and status on this dashboard. I now have a single firewall policy in the cloud for all my branches. It's a layer 7 based firewall, so it's application aware. I can come in and typical firewall rule table set here. I can define the action, the application, the ports and protocols, so all the 5 tuple stuff, and the hit counts and even the time of day criteria. The other one I wanted to highlight is our cloud malware defense, which allows your cloud security stack to monitor different platforms for the introduction of malware. So I'm showing Office 365 and our own WebEx Teams. These are different files people have shared with each other or uploaded into OneDrive. We're constantly looking and scrubbing those files to see if they're malware. And if they are, we can take action on those, which is up to include deleting them.
How do you handle multiple V6 prefixes from different providers? Is that done based on a service check, and you have both prefixes configured on the end stations? How's that done? That's a hard problem to solve, is why I'm asking.
Yeah, and I don't know the answer to that because I haven't had to deal with that one quite yet. So we'll have to get you an answer out of band.
Okay.
All right, so this one is a full stack deployment via SASE. The idea here is that I want to provide wired, wireless. I want to provide even systems management like MDM functionality. I need VPN. I want the security stack. I want it all. And I want it to be as simple as possible as part of full deployment. So the core elements here, AMP for the endpoints. We have WebEx in here. We have for the collaboration tools, and then the whole Meraki full stack, wired, wireless, VPN, even systems management or MDM, and the security stack in the cloud. The idea here is that common use cases for this have been emerging and changing as our world has been changing, but we've seen a pretty high uptick in the home office use case here, where it's a full stack. It's usually 1 or 2 devices though. It would be a router or a next-gen firewall in the MX or UTM, and then some access points at the home office. Folks are doing that primarily because the alternative for their core users is they're now the help desk for all those remote users. Whatever they bought at the local electronics store is what I got to support now. and my help desk team is completely overwhelmed, and there's gaming systems on there, and they're taking the bandwidth during working out, like all the problems that our customers deal with. Almost all of those go away when you do a system like this for work at home, where you provide the experience, the wired, the wireless, the VPN, and you put it as your head end at the home. So all your existing network, if you want to keep it, sits behind it. And now we apply SD-WAN, we apply quality of service, we apply health and performance monitoring, so that we now have a good feel to be able to troubleshoot those home offices. Comes at a cost, right? It's not the least expensive of all our use cases. So we recommend it for those core users. Let me show you this one. So we're just going to start by showing off some of the integration here. And so inside of Umbrella, we have APIs. We're going to grab the API keys and link Umbrella with Meraki. They have a API-based relationship so that we can ease the configuration of the stack in the cloud with the on-premise stack. So here I have an MX68W, which is a UTM device providing wired wireless VPN and a bunch of security. When I go to the threat protection area, you'll see that it does a lot of things. It's got built-in AMP for anti-malware, files going across the wire. It's got threat grid so it can peel apart those files and look inside of them. It's got IPS and it's got Umbrella. So here's where I paste those API credentials. And once I do that, it goes out to Umbrella, fetches the policies, and then I can select one to use for here. And whichever one I want to select the branch one here. Now all of the DNS traffic is now flowing through the cloud and providing that security stack in the cloud type protection. When I go to Umbrella and see this happening, I now have a lot more telemetry than I had before the integration. If I look at the full details on one of the log events, I can see the internal IP, like the pre-NATed address, as well as the post-NATed address, and all the information there. One of the hardest things with doing security these days and doing decryption is getting the darn certificate out to everybody in a timely fashion. So that's where Meraki Systems Manager stack can help. It's a full-blown MDM type solution. You're showing here a policy to do that certificate provisioning. Works on Windows, Mac, Linux, iOS, Android, all of it, to deliver out these certificates so that when I do decrypt in the cloud, that traffic stream, this is going to be a trusted experience, and the users don't have to, they won't even know. So the last but not least is SecureX. So seeing all of this come into our SecureX platform, the Umbrella talks to here. We have Stealth Watch. We have AMP for endpoints that talks through here. And this is one of the dashboard views that tells you about your risk and your health. Inside of an incident investigation, I'm just looking at oneobservable/.org and trying to figure out who's involved. And on the right-hand side, I can see I have 3 targets. And the one that came from the Meraki unit, it was an IP address sitting behind it. So now I have visibility that it didn't just come from that Meraki MX68, it actually came from that IP address behind it, which is the internal address, that 192 address that you see there. So now I can pivot on any of these attributes and ask the other security tools. In my case, I have 13 security tools inside of my SecureX instance. What do you know about all of these things? And it draws that nice, pretty map for you on the left. The last one is tunnel integration or automation. So like we showed you Viptela, being able to set up hundreds or thousands of tunnels pretty easily. We have a similar functionality in Meraki. I'll show you what we have today and where we're going to go with it. But essentially, you go into Meraki, you set a tag on the branches or the devices that you want it to have a tunnel. And my tag here is SIG12345, so not very inventive. The Meraki team developed and published a script on GitHub that will go through APIs, find all of those tagged sites, and automatically instantiate the tunnel to the best branch using that BGP Anycache routing. And this is an example of one that just got configured. And you'll see the availability is limited to just those that have the tag. Now, where we're going with this, obviously, is take it from an out-of-band script into embedded nature inside of the Meraki dashboard itself to give you the similar, same experience that you had with the Viptela experience we went through earlier. And now here you can see the tunnels coming up inside of Umbrella. You have all the context behind them, and because it's a Meraki full stack, you can get user right down to the user level telemetry of the IP address that's behind that router, and get an end-to-end view of what might be happening. All right, let's move into the last C then. Let's move into the first C then, which is connect. So we walked through the different scenarios, and along the way, we did the 3 Cs. We were connecting things, controlling them, and converging them. And when we look at connecting, for us, it means these types of capabilities on the right-hand side. How am I connecting users that are on the wireless LAN or on the LAN, SD-WAN, hybrid WAN, remote access, all the different ways that we could possibly connect them? Let's make sure that it's part of our SASE architecture, part of our system. So it becomes agnostic. I don't really care anymore how they connect. I'm going to help them do that the most efficient way possible through automation, and then connect them and control that through the cloud. And that's kind of what our SD-WAN is also designed to do. So when we dive into multi-cloud SD-WAN, it's all about any service, anywhere, using any transport. Don't care if it's 5G, MPLS, satellite. We're going to be able to find the best path for you at any given moment and route the traffic appropriately. A relatively newer innovation is the SASE Cloud on-ramp for multi-cloud. And this means we're going to automate the extension of the SD-WAN fabric into IaaS. So we want to extend that SD-WAN fabric into AWS and Azure and Google and GCP, et cetera. Why would we do that? Well, we would do that so that now we have a even more end-to-end experience of optimization from that user to that app experience. It allows us to do unified policies as well, because we can segment that traffic all the way, right into VPC in the case of AWS, and it allows us to do that orchestration through automation. And then inside of control, we talked about Umbrella being our cloud-based security stack. Here's a little bit of deeper dive into some of the capabilities that are up there. DNS layer, super important for us, not only because we're pioneers in it, but because it's the quickest and easiest thing to do on a security stack to get rid of the bad stuff quickly. DNS happens before the TCP connection happens. So if I can prevent all the resources required to stand up a TCP session, decrypt the TCP session, look in the packet to see if it's bad through maybe IPS, and then decide to drop the packet, wouldn't it be great if I could just do it at the DNS layer and never have to go through that? So that's what we do. We drop a vast majority of the bad stuff at that layer and never have to proceed any further. Secure Web Gateway, full-blown Secure Web Gateway in the cloud here. Layer 7 firewall we touched on. CASB, some of the newer stuff that hits, it's in beta right now and it hits this quarter, is remote browser isolation. And that is a browser sandbox in the cloud. I'll show you a demo of that here in shortly. Data loss prevention, and then we have cloud malware detection. All right, and with Duo, the Duo functionality I think we've touched on already, but I want to highlight that device posture and health, which gives you least privilege access based on user, their MFA type user, and then also the device that they're on. So if I pick up grandma's PC and I log in through MFA, still no worky because I'm not on a protected and sanctioned PC. And that leads us to our final demo. We'll show off some of the security stack. So remote browser isolation is the first one I want to start with. Made it really easy to do this. It's part of our web policy. You just go into our web policy, and now we have an additional rule action for web traffic. And in this case, we're saying isolate is the name of it, but instead of doing block, or warn or allow, we have a new one, isolate. If it matches on this, it automatically instantiates that browser in the cloud, and your traffic goes to and through that browser in the cloud based on normal web criteria, destinations, categories, applications, etc. You can quickly move and manipulate these rules around in order, just like in a firewall rule set. And this is what it looks like. Before RBI, I go to CNN and I look at the page, and there's a ton of code here, like all sorts of things that could happen. All the vulnerabilities are totally exposed to my browser hijacking, etc. I'm open to that. After RBI, same page, this is all the code that's left. So very simple, huge reduction in attack surface. So remote access VPN as a service is something coming as well. And that will be remote access through AnyConnect in the Umbrella cloud. So that you can connect up your users instead of a gateway on your on-prem, it'll be up in the cloud. This is an example of our beta where I just connected up into a cloud-based VPN, and now the backhaul comes from the cloud back down to me. And that allows me then to get to my private applications just like I would before, but I don't have any hardware to deploy, nothing to upgrade, nothing to manage from that standpoint. And then it's pretty simple to set up here. The KISS principle is here. We've got the two connectors. One goes to my corporate site, one goes up to the cloud. So whether I'm going to corporate or going to the internet, I'm still protected by that cloud security stack. Here's me connected up into it. It gives me a little bit of information about that user experience. And then the config is super simple. Just what IP address range you want me to use on these remote users, and then a little bit about the AnyConnect settings. So this one is as I said, in beta and coming soon. That SIG tunnel that's there for those same users, I can apply the full security stack to their traffic. The next one is DLP. So we have a full-blown inline DLP now in the cloud. It looks for credit cards, PII, PHI, 80-some plus built-in rule sets. You can customize this data classification to your heart's content. Everything from just pure regex to using some of the built-in identifiers to help out and creating your own rules. And then the last one I want to highlight is this, or apps discovery. This is around helping with that shadow IT use case, controlling applications, CASB functionality. Here's a look at the app discovery screen. You can even dive into specific threats. So SolarWinds is one that we released. If you were to click on that, it would tell you if you're infected with SolarWinds. Here's a WannaCry one. Click on that, it'll tell you who's reached out to those known command and control entities, the known malware downloads and drive-bys that are affected with named exploits and named attacks. And then the cloud malware one, just a little bit more detail on this one because I showed it to you briefly before. Here I got 4 platforms installed, but I can show you the risk profile. So yes, there's malware on Office 365, but who did it? Well, Jimmy Jones did it. This is where it's located. What is the exposure? So here it says private. So he hasn't shared it publicly. If he had, it would show me exactly who he shared it with outside of my company. And then a little bit about what the actual exploit was or attack is. And I can analyze this in SecureX with one click there as well. All right, and to kind of wrap this up, I just wanted to talk about the direct peering. We have direct peering relationships with over 1,000 different organizations. Some of those are listed there for your viewing pleasure, but we've done some third-party testing that is now published, and it shows things like 50% performance increase for some of these key apps, a huge decrease in latency and hop count by going from the user to the cloud, from our cloud to your application is more efficient than going from your user directly across your SP's path to that same application. And we're at 250 bidirectional performance on per tunnel, but you can bond those together to get more performance. So I will end on this one, secure end-to-end network edge and security architecture, where we have security as a service with our networking SD-WAN, our remote access converging for both the edge as well as remote workers, in a complete solution.
So I think we talked a little bit earlier about what you guys were doing in Roadmap with respect to IPv6 on the routing side. On the security analytics side, we're seeing an increase in threats, specifically tunneling over V4 networks using V6 and reserve V6 ranges to get out to command and control nodes and things like that. Is that in the security analytics today? And if it's not, is it on the roadmap?
Yeah, it is. And it depends on where it's coming from, but like our next gen firewall brings telemetry to Talos that has that type of data. So does our AMP for Endpoints agent, can show you that kind of data. In many cases, we have the ability to manipulate the IPv6 stack as well, either at the routed layer or at the host layer, so that we can start to black hole IPv6 traffic, for example, so that it can't slip through, things like that.